Think we are ready. Make sure yep, okay. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Pete Constant, and I will be moderating tonight's event. I want to do a couple of brief introductions, and then I'll give you an overview of how we will run the debate forum this evening, and then we'll jump right into it. This event is being hosted by the Silicon Valley Taxpayers Association. We have not taken a position, nor do we intend to take a position on this ballot measure that the voters will weigh in on this election cycle. My name, as I mentioned, is Pete Constant. I'm a former council member from the city of San Jose, and I'm currently the vice president of the Silicon Valley Taxpayers Association. We have with us our president, Mark Hinkle, here in the second row, and one of our board members, another former San Jose City Council member, Pierluigi Oliverio. We have representatives from both sides of the issue here. They'll each be given an opportunity to weigh in on all of the questions that are posed tonight. We are going to start out with opening statements of 4 minutes per side for them to make any comments that they would like to make. Once they do that, I have a set of prepared questions that have been developed by the Taxpayers Association board and members. Each side will have 2 minutes in which to answer the questions that are posed to them. Each side will have an opportunity to answer each question. If there is any confusion or clarification needed, I may ask either follow-up questions or clarification questions. And if I do so, the parties I pose the question to will have 30 seconds in order to answer that follow-up question or provide the clarification. I ask that if you have your phones, join me in putting them on silent mode. Mine's going to be on airplane mode, so it's not vibrating. I will be using it as our timer. There will be a chime from my phone when your time is up. Please respect the timer and do not continue past that if we can manage not to. The yes side is to my right, your left. We have with us tonight Mayor Lisa Gilmore and Council Member Teresa O'Neill. The no side is to my left, your right. We have Vice Mayor Karen Hardy and Council Member Raz Chahal. With that, we are going to go for 1 hour. This is a 1 hour format. With that, we are going to go ahead and get started, and I will provide the opening statement first for our yes side.
Good evening, everybody. Santa Clarans, Measure C is just another chance for you to determine your destiny and the future of our city. I've been involved in this issue of how can we improve our election process, probably longer than anybody in this room here in Santa Clara, for about over 15 years. I care very deeply about it. When I was on the Santa Clara School Board, I tried to raise the issue of changing how trustees were elected there. And when I was not able to do that, I voluntarily stepped down from the school board to open a seat to give a chance to an underrepresented community to get elected. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the way we wanted, but that was my intent. I then later started looking at what the city was doing, and I formulated a request and took it to what was then the Ethics Committee to eliminate, at least as a start, to eliminate the numbered seats. That proposal kind of got stalled. And then later, I served as vice chair of the 2011 Charter Review Committee. And that was a very interesting process. So I just kind of say that as a prelude. So when we talk about Santa Clara, what are we? We are a diverse community of many ethnic, cultural, religious backgrounds, and we're distributed evenly across the entire city. We don't have large ethnic enclaves such as a city like San Jose. So we have a different challenge where it may be harder to, particularly with a district model, to specifically to elect members of the council who are from communities of color. But I want to say that I would never be so arrogant or ignorant to presume that I know of or have lived the prejudice experienced by Asian Americans. But my understanding has grown from the stories of my grandparents, coming from immigrant families where they experienced prejudice, hearing the stories of friends whose families suffered the indignity and the crime of internment, and having several people from other countries come to live with me. My family, as I'm sure is the case with many of yours, has become very ethnically diverse in recent decades. And we also have to remember that Santa Clara has supported many Asian elected representatives, including Congressman Norm Mineta, Mike Honda, and Ro Khanna, Assembly members Paul Fong and Kansan Shu, and County Board of Education member Anna Song, as well as a number of Asian descent trustees on the Santa Clara School Board. So Measure C honors the vote of the residents from the November 2018 election to have a charter review committee investigate and recommend some form of district elections. The council did not write the Measure C proposal. The Citizens Charter Review Committee did. Measure C proposes 3 districts with 2 council members each. Nothing in the California Voter Rights Act prevents us from having multi-member districts. Measure C won't create at-large elections. Measure C is a different model from what Santa Clara Unified uses, which includes a couple of multi-member districts but voted at large. Measure C lets voters select a council member each election cycle. Many residents have said that they miss not having a voice in the election of all 7 council members. Measure C provides more direct representation. And we could possibly lead to more diversity, as candidates will have an opportunity to run in their district every 2 years. Measure C provides each resident with 2 council members to focus on their needs in their neighborhoods, especially if one council member has limited participation or resigns, as we have recently experienced. Measure C is very similar to how we elect our U.S. senators. Having to campaign in 1/3 of Santa Clara is still a significant reduction in area. If you don't have time to campaign 1/3 of our city, you may not have enough time to serve as council member.
Thank you. We will now move to the no side. Yes.
The California Voter Rights Act was enacted in 2011. I was on the first Charter Review Committee after that. We gave a lot of suggestions, and the City Council ignored them completely. They noted and filed all of our recommendations. The problem is the City Council has kicked this can down the road, and that has caused us some problems. Because in June of 2018, there was a judgment against the city, and they said we had racially polarized voting. That is a fact. The remedy that was given in July of 2018 was 6 districts. It was very, very clear, and it was even the city that came up with how those districts would be, those boundaries. When people talk about, oh, that was only for 2 elections, 2018, 2020, well, after 2020, we will have a census, a new census, and lines will be redrawn after that. But the 6 districts is what the judge put upon us because of the racially polarized voting. The reality is, Measure C, in my mind, is in direct violation of that judgment. The judgment was for 6 districts because we have 6 council members. We need to understand that if we are in violation of that, we very possibly could be sued again. The group that sued us the first time said they will sue again. When I raised my hand and made an oath that I would uphold the California Constitution and the laws, I meant it. And I feel that this will not uphold the California state law, the California Voters' Rights Act. It's unfair to minorities because it dilutes their vote. Thank you. It makes running for council twice as expensive and makes it very hard for grassroots campaigns. If we don't want to have people getting involved in our politics that don't live in the city, we need to make it less expensive.
I respectfully say that Measure C is a flawed measure. Here's a copy of the judgment. The judgment clearly mentioned 4 things. we are in violation of California Voting Rights Act. Second, the standing judgment clearly mentioned that city is divided into 6 districts. Third, the judgment clearly mentioned that city as well as the registrar of voters is prohibited to conduct at-large elections. Not only the whole measure is flawed, even the impartial analysis by the city is flawed, because it mentioned that Measure C doesn't pass, we'll go to at-large election. That is not true. The standing judgment, true is standing judgment. We do not violate California Superior Court judgment. If we do Measure C, we will be in contempt of court, and we will be again sued for the violations. And you know what? We already lost $3.3 million. We are on hook for $3.3 million. And we are on hook for our attorney fees of almost $800K. So we are always under $4 million. And no California city has ever won a CVRA lawsuit. Give you an example. Our city has more majority-minority city. Minorities are in majority. Roswell City, it has 70% of whites, 30% other. 80% voters are white. You know what they did? Without even a demand letter, they divided the city into ordinance by into multiple districts. That's what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you. I did fail to mention in my opening comments that this event is being streamed on the city stream, the Silicon Valley Taxpayers Association Facebook live stream, and Kirk Vartan's personal Facebook live stream. So there's multiple ways for people to be watching this today. We'll now get into our questions. A reminder that we have 2 minutes to answer. I will pose the question once, but it will be for both sides. We will alternate so that we start with the opposing side with each question. The first question, we'll start with the parties to my right, the for side, and then move to the no. The next one, we'll start with the no and move to the yes. The first question, we've heard interesting arguments about the size and the number of districts. Can you tell us why specifically that you think 6 districts is better than 3, or 3 districts is better than 6, and why?
Okay, I'll start. I think that 3 districts are better than 6 because it allows each resident to have 2 representatives. And as we mentioned, we've recently had a council member resign, so we potentially face for the rest of the year not having a representative from that district. Also, people in Santa Clara were used to voting for all members of the city council, and by having this model, they will get a chance to vote each election cycle. And they will have a little, they will have more than one person to go to. If one person isn't available, they still have 2 people that are directly accountable to that neighborhood. And I think 1/3 of the city is a reasonable size. It still makes it much easier than covering the entire city, which a lot of us in this room have experienced trying to do that. From a campaign standpoint, it brings down the cost of the ballot statement to a reasonable level. The city will still provide half of the cost of the ballot statement if you comply with the ethics code. And I think that it is a reasonable compromise.
I'm going to add on to that if there's still time left. I think the most important thing about 3 versus 6 is that in a larger area, the council members and 2 council members in the third of the city are going to have a more regional view of the city of Santa Clara as opposed to a more parochial view in a small 6-district election here in the city, or 6-district concept. And it's important that council members look at the city as a whole. Using San Jose as an example, 6 districts are equivalent size is like having 50 districts in San Jose. That's how small that is. And what happens is you may not be sensitive to issues in other districts and therefore vote against. And I'll give an example. In the stadium area, we have one council member that changed her vote after the election because she's not as sensitive to what's happening in District 1. So it does give a lot of problems.
Time. Need the question repeated?
No, that's good.
Okay, go
Thank
ahead.
you. So it's a question of 6 versus 3. So I go back to the judgment. no city in California after CVRA lawsuit has been divided into the type of division we are wanting. Every city has been asked to divide into 6 district type of a scenario. So that's the first point. Now, if we do 3, again violation. Again, millions of dollars will be going back to where they should not be. Now going back to the 6 versus 3. Both of us ran first time in the 6 district platform. And we were able to compete with special interest without even getting a single dime of a special interest. Both of us has a record of that. We were able to compete with the special interest money which was poured into our opponents. You know why? Because we could walk the precincts, we could talk to the people, we could send our message how it is important. So money. If you will have 6 districts, smaller district, less money, less special interest will be there. Second thing, neighborhood representation. Take example of 2 cities, District 1, District 2. District 1 is 50% Asian. District 2, my district, is 27% Hispanic. If you combine these, again, you are missing the point of a minority representation. You will be clubbing them, and then again a competition between the minorities again. So that's why I say that 6 districts are much better than 3 districts, and it will save tons of money to us.
I'll finish that with, it dilutes the vote. And we looked up Palm Springs, and they are only 48,000, and they have 5 districts. So to say that our districts are too small doesn't make sense at all, because many, many cities, much smaller than us, have 5 or 6 districts.
Thank you. Under time. I appreciate that. Our next question, again, will be starting with my left side this time. Do you believe that changing the size of the districts and consequently the number of districts, whether that be 3 or 6, requires a reducing of the voluntary expenditure limits since those were originally created for citywide at-large elections?
Obviously, they can be looked at again. The nice thing for Raj and I, we were able to experience this 6-district situation. We had special interests send us money, and we sent it back. We were able to keep it to individuals. Most of them lived right in the city, some of them in our district, some of them not, but cared about it because they knew that council members, their vote covers everything in the city. Our vote covers at large. But it's important to me that my neighbors be able to step on my doorstep and talk to me about what's working and what's not. And that's important because we haven't had anyone from the city council in my part of Santa Clara for decades.
If I may add, reducing the expense limits will not help. I'll tell you the reason. If we are not taking any special interest money, we are fighting the election on our own. If we reduce the limit, I do not control the special interest, but I control my own limits. So if you reduce the limit, it will be again putting that particular candidate in a negative aspect because outside money, our campaign finance laws are so filthy. They need review, they need to be changed, and they have to be changed. But if you restrict that money for a candidate who's not taking any special interest money, that's a disadvantage to him. So I would not say that you should reduce the special interest, reduce the limit expenditure for a particular seat. Rather, it should be remain same so that candidate like us who do not want any special interest money can still fight the elections and fight the special interest who are going against us.
Thank you. Let me ask my first clarifying question just to, and this will be to you, Raj. Are you saying that the expenditure limits should be eliminated or they should be changed?
They should not be changed. Like right now, whatever limits we have for the council members, they should be stayed as the same.
Okay, thank you. Would you like the question asked again?
It would help the audience.
Okay. Do you believe that by changing the size of districts and whether there'll be 3 or 6 requires reducing the voluntary expenditure limit since those were originally created for citywide at-large elections?
Well, I think the first thing we need to talk about, like we've had a lot of discussion from the other side about the fear of special interest money. I find that very ironic because we are involved in an election where the no on Measure C campaign is being funded by $650,000 completely from outside interests, Jed York and the San Francisco 49er football companies. This is an example of what special interest money can do. So that's a little bit of an irony there. I would be willing to look at reducing the expenditure limits. I think, as I said, one of the costs that will go down for people appreciably is the cost of the ballot statement. Because for a lot of candidates who are truly doing grassroots campaigning, that may be their biggest expense, is what they can put in the ballot.
Yes, and I just wanted to say, I'm also for reducing the cost of the expenditures. In the last election, I had to run citywide, but yet those in districts were able to 1/6 the size of where I had to run, were able to, raise similar amounts of money. But what I think our biggest fear on the small districts is, and raising less money and other things, is the outside influence, the dark money all of us have been hearing about lately, and the outside special interests, which is really evident with this particular election. If Google put in $650,000 in Mountain View, or Apple put in $650,000 in Cupertino, or the 49ers put $650,000 in Santa Clara, they're asking you to, support them and Santa Clara to be a company town. So it's not what our candidates are spending, but it's the outside money that's coming in from the outside interest trying to control the city council, and that is our biggest threat to the council races.
Thank you. Well, since you both sides brought up outside money, I'm going to jump ahead to what was going to be a question later on and just get to it right now so that we can stay on this topic. Our organization, the Taxpayers Association, first became interested in this measure because of the controversies around the, quote, dark money. We understand that Santa Clara has a ordinance, a local dark money ordinance. It is, I believe, the first in the state, potentially the nation, that is this specific. And as we've seen here, there's accusations of that outside dark money influencing elections, both past and current. So with that, can we address that issue? Can you talk about the importance of that issue to voters in this election, or is it simply a distraction from the issues of what numbers of districts we have? And we're going to start back with you since we are alternating.
First of all, it's become a distraction because we really wanted an honest debate in our city and having our community weigh in on how they want to change the charter and what types of districts we wanted to see in the city. But now we have the interference of the outside forces to the tune of $650,000 plus to attempt to try to buy influence on the city council. One asks, well, why would that be? Smaller districts makes it easier for the outside interests to manipulate council members, because once the council members determine that you are only elected by those in your district, and maybe you're not as sensitive to other areas of the city, then one by one they can start to take over. But it's important, the dark money issue, and both Councilmember O'Neill and I are on the committee that put that together. It was important because in 2016 we had a dark money group, Blue Pack, that came in and had anonymous mailers and everything else to try to control the makeup of the Santa Clara City Council. And normally you see it at a federal level. We saw it at the local level. We became afraid. And other cities are watching our dark money ordinance to see, because they don't want to become company towns either. So that is one of the most important things, and I want to thank our city clerk, Hazama Gog, who's really enforcing our dark money ordinance. It's that important to the future of our community.
And I want to echo some of what Mayor Gilmore said. I think it is unfortunate because how we elect people, this is a lot about who we are as a community and as people. And elections are not just, this isn't just about the candidates, it's about the result that you're going to end up with for the people. And, we've got to figure out what system works best to serve the needs of the people in the community. Yes, it's important to serve the needs of the candidates, but it's unfortunate that now a lot of the conversation.
So I won't repeat the whole setup to the question, but the core question is, this dark money issue that's been alluded to from both sides, the outside influence money, is this an important issue for the voters at this point, or is it a distraction from the issue of district elections at this time? Vice
Good
Mayor.
question. I think it is somewhat of a distraction, but I will say that I personally was outspent more than 10 to 1. And so it's not always about how much money you spend. Raj and I, and then Patty Mahan voted against this on the council. It passed to the voters at a 4-3 vote. We didn't feel like it was a good idea then. It has nothing to do with the 49ers or any money, because I find it kind of almost hilarious. I worked so hard against Measure J. I walked precincts. I said it was a bad idea. I lived off Lafayette Street back in the 80s and watched them build the 49ers training camp. I knew what it would do, and I didn't like it, and I didn't want them here. But the reality is I lost that one. People on the other side of this are the ones that brought them here, and now we have to deal with them. And that's the reality. They have the right to do what they want. They've had to disclose it, so what? They've disclosed it. Some people are uncomfortable voting with them. Politics makes strange bedfellows. They're not going to tell me what to do, and I don't think they really like me, but that's their problem.
So these are two entirely different things, issues, and residents and voters should decide on the facts of the issue. Measure C, if you pass this thing, we are losing millions of dollars. So they're two entirely different things. So don't mix those, and they're both important things. So I fully support dark money ordinance. And as I mentioned earlier, this country needs campaign finance reforms today, not tomorrow, so that we can fix the issues we are facing in this election, we have faced in the past election. She was outspent 10:1. I was outspent 4:1, probably.
Time.
And so the issues should be on the fact-based.
Thank you. We've heard mention and we've heard both sides differ on the issue of racially polarized voting, which is really the heart of the lawsuit that has been referred to. Can you tell us if you believe that there has been racially polarized voting or any other voting rights violations in Santa Clara elections? And this time we will start with our no side.
Thank you. So when we say racially polarized voting, we have to look at the California Voting Rights Act of 2002. How Federal Voting Rights Act came and how California Voting Rights Act came. So it should, whether we have a racially polarized community or not, doesn't matter at all. It is how the election demographics is to be seen in the court of law. And when you say whether the city has it, I say no, we don't have it. But when the demographics analyzed the data for last 7, 8 elections, they found that proponents of California Voting Rights Act violation as per the racially polarized voting did happen. And that may not correspond to 1:1, but the background statistics showed that. So irrespective of that, we are a land of laws. California made this law so that we can protect the minorities. There is a Federal Voting Rights Act. There is a California Voting Rights Act. So that particular judgment in June of 2018 did find us that we were found racially polarized voting in our city. And the remedy, we were divided into the districts. So 6 districts. And irrespective of whether our community is or not, and I say it is not racially polarized on personal basis. But the statistics proved that it is, and the remedy was provided 6 districts. And that's what I would like to say, if you want to add.
I would agree with you. That was the remedy. That was the judgment call. Whether we feel that way, that is when they looked at the numbers, that was the determination. That's a fact.
And if I may add to that, look at the scenario I earlier quoted. Roseville, only 10-20% of minority. We have more than 50% minorities.
Wonder if it's a coincidence that Roseville keeps getting brought up. That's where I moved to. So, that made me lose my place. So racially polarized voting, would you like me to re-ask that question?
Just ask the question
Okay.
again, yes.
So the question is, we've heard both sides differ, and we've already heard it brought up, the issue of racially polarized voting, which is essentially the heart of the lawsuit that the city has faced. Can you tell us if you believe there's been racially polarized voting or other voting rights violations in the city of Santa Clara?
Okay, first of all, I want to echo what Councilmember O'Neill said earlier about the city of Santa Clara, how diverse we are throughout the city, which was evidenced by our demographer in showing that we don't have areas of Santa Clara that have clusters of different populations. We live all together. We live pretty well. It's a beautiful, diverse city. In 2018, Santa Clara was sued by a group that argued we had a history of racially polarized voting. In looking through the lawsuits and looking through the appeal and everything else, what's very important, and one of the reasons and the main reason that Santa Clara appealed the judge's decision was that through the plaintiff's own demographers and experts, with a 95% confidence level, they found out of the last 10 elections that Santa Clara had racially polarized voting in 3 of the 10 elections, which does not make Santa Clara racially polarized as far as our citizens go. But what the judge did after that was the judge lowered the standard from the 95% confidence level down to 80% confidence level, which then made 5 out of the last 10 elections to be racially polarized, which is still not a majority of elections in Santa Clara to be racially polarized. So we do not believe that our citizens in Santa Clara vote based on race and skin color. So we looked at the statistics where the judge had to lower to make the case, so we have appealed the decision. The judge invoked 6 districts, took out the numbers districts, 6 districts, for the November election in 2020. After that, we're at large.
Thank you. So both sides have mentioned some level of statistics as we've gone along here. I'm probably one of the few people that's read all 20-plus court cases related to this Voting Rights Act because of some of the work I'm doing in my hometown. I'd like to ask you guys if you could elaborate a little bit on the statistical portion. So, Raj, I know you made some mentions about the last election cycle, and I know our other side has made some. I'd like you to kind of hone in on that so that the group here can get a little more information from the statistical viewpoint if you have that. And I'm going to go to Raj first because he used, I guess, the hardest numbers or the most specific numbers. This is a follow-up. I'm going to give you a minute on the follow-up.
Okay. So when Mayor Gilmore says we don't have a pockets, let me quote the judgment. The Asian CVAP percentage for District 1 is 51%. That's the pocket. This is proper remedy under both CVRA and FVRA. The lines drawn for District 2 also enhances the voting power of Latino voters. The Latino CVAP percentage in that district is 27%. So the judgment has used good statistics. And look at the demographics of the judgment itself. We have residents 46.3% non-Hispanic whites, 39.5% as Asian, 16.9% Latinos. So we do have pockets. We do have demographic which is divided, and all these factors were taken into account when we were found in violation of CVRA. And all these factors were taken into account when we decided about 6 districts. And you know what? The 6 districts were agreed by the court as submitted by the city, not by anybody else, as submitted by the city demographics.
Okay, time. Thank you. We'll now move to our other side.
Okay.
It's 1 minute for this one.
Okay. First of all, the plaintiffs didn't carry their burden of proof based on their own data. And again, the reason for the appeal, 3 out of 10 elections had racially polarized voting in Santa Clara. The trial court said 5 out of 10. The trial court came to their conclusions based not on the evidence in the record, but on their own amended calculations. So the court used non-statistical evidence to make their determination. And if we talk about statistics all the time, I mean, that's what is most important in this, that the court ultimately find that the trial court then lowered the confidence level from 95% to 80% and performed its own analysis and found, after they performed their own analysis, they changed it from 3 out of 10 to 5 out of 10 elections, and that's a fact. It's in the documents here. I only read one of the cases, Santa Clara.
Time, thank you. We're going to sort of continue along this thread of the court case since we're there. There's been some confusion about what happens if Measure C does not pass. We've heard from one side that the portion about the 6 districts is a permanent portion of that measure. I believe the opponents disagree with that. And then we have the city attorney's impartial analysis that I've had an opportunity to read and that each of the voters should have an opportunity to read before they vote. It's in the voter pamphlet. And in that, the city attorney states that if it fails, the city will return to at-large districts. So I think we probably know that there's a difference on whether that's accurate or not. So I'd like to hear from each side, is that accurate? And the most important part, why? And we're going to start with our proponents.
So the ruling from the judge applied to the elections of 2018 and 2020. And what we have the opportunity as a charter city is then to come up with our a solution that will meet the goals of the requirements of the California Voting Rights Act. If that lapses, our charter currently, if the court order only applies to 2018 and 2020, which is the legal opinions that we have been given, after that time, we will revert to what our charter says. We are a charter city. What we want is we want to maintain the place of the charter and how the city is governed, and that's why we're looking to change the charter and not have our charter be out of sync with what we're actually doing in terms of the election. And so because we do agree that we should not have 6 or at-large 6 council members elected. That's why we're trying to find another solution, and we're going with the solution that was proposed by the members of the committee, the majority of the members of the committee, and is not out of compliance with the California Voting Rights Act. So that's where we believe we are. We don't want to be back in a situation where we are not in compliance.
Anything, Mayor? We have about 30 seconds.
Well, I also want to say the only way the charter can be changed is by the people and not by the judge. It has to be the people. So if we keep defaulting back to want a different system than at large, we have to change the charter. The only way we can is by a vote of the people, and that's the way it should be. So that's the attempt for Measure C, to change the charter. So come the end of November 2020, we're not going back to at-large. If the city wins the appeal, we go back to at-large. So these are, the situations. If there's no on Measure C after November 2020, we're back to at-large. We don't want to be there. We'd like to have districts in Santa Clara. So the only is the community has to make that decision.
I respectfully disagree. 29 charter cities in California have changed their election code by ordinance. That's a reality. And in the remedy phase, the court orders the city to adopt district-based elections. That is, and it gives the 6 and it gives the districts. That was ordered. That is part of the judgment. Go ahead, Raj.
So the judgment never said that this judgment will end in after 2018, after 2020. So the judgment was The court further orders that the election to be held each district in the sequence below. They defined how the election will be held going forward. So first fallacy, the court judgment was not only for these 2 cycles. Further, look, I'll read further from the judgment. Consistent with this requirement, the city and registrar of voters are enjoined from holding at-large election for any city council members. So they permanently reduce the at-large to district. And furthermore, going further, it said, I'm not abrogating the whole charter, but I'm only changing Charter Section 600 to replace at-large with district elections, and Charter Section 700.1, how the districts are numbered. And that's the judgment. It's a clear judgment. And you know what? As regards the ordinance, as Vice Mayor mentioned, 29 cities have passed, and Roseville is the latest one. They passed using California Government Code 34886, which clearly defines you can change your charter only for CVRA. Only for CVRA you can change your charter, and you have to specifically mention in the ordinance that we are changing the charter as per this clause of CVRA. And I have copies of ordinances from Roseville. I have copies from Palm Spring. They
Time.
changed it, and we
Time.
can do it too.
Well, I just want to congratulate my SVTA board members, because every question that's on my list is something that's already been mentioned, so it's very easy to follow up. I guess they did their homework well. Okay, we'll go on to our next question. I've heard arguments about the desire of Santa Clara voters to vote in each election year, and we've heard that again here tonight. With 3 districts and 2 council members per district, there'll be a council candidate on the ballot every election for each district. With 6 districts, there'll be a council member on the ballot for each district every other election cycle. So the question that I pose, starting with you, is how important is that election sequencing? The fact that people may or may not get to vote every election cycle, depending on which way we end up with 3 or 6 districts.
Well, we know that the Register of Voters is always begging everyone to vote and trying to make it easier and easier, because not everyone who is eligible or even registered votes. So to say that Santa Clarans are lining up and beating down the door to want to vote every time doesn't make sense to me. The reality is, you need to have, if you have someone who is in a neighborhood, you could have, if you had only 3 districts, you could have 2 council members in that same neighborhood, which is the problem we've had for years when so many council members lived in the old quad, they couldn't even vote as a council on some things that were involved with the old quad. By keeping the 6 districts, we have spread out the realities and we have representation and understanding. But my vote, even though I'm in District 3, counts for every single resident of Santa Clara. I don't care who calls me. I don't ask them where they live. They tell me what the concern is. I don't care. I represent the residents of my city.
If I may add, when we are elected from a district, we are elected from district, but our job is to work for the whole city. We cannot, if we need to solve the problems of traffic, affordable housing, I cannot just concentrate on my district itself. So the fundamental thing, when we are on the council on this dais, we are working for the city. Yes, how it helps a smaller district, I can have a much better feedback from a smaller district. I can bring that feedback because I can contact much more people in my neighborhood and bring that to the whole council. And that's how it is helpful. So voting for 1 cycle or 2 cycle is not that important, but serving the residents in the best way, that's much more important.
Time.
Okay, I think that being able to vote is very important. And I think I mentioned earlier, I've had people say to me that they have felt somewhat disenfranchised, that they don't have as much they don't get to vote for all the members of the council. So I disagree with that, that they have enough representation. And also, I disagree with that. Not all Santa Clarans vote. Santa Clara is a very engaged community. Our last couple of elections, we set a standard this nation should, look to. We've had like over 80% voter turnout. That says to me that people in this city care a lot and they want to vote on things. I've not always approved of everything that's happened, or I think some other things should be changed. But I think to say that people don't really care if they vote or not is a very disingenuous comment. And also, I think sometimes if the districts, by having, I understand that in the past you had a conglomeration of people in the old quad, but that that's not the way it is anymore. There's much more engagement all across the city. And once again, I think by having a slightly larger district, you give another person, what if, well, you live 3 blocks away from another great candidate. I think one of the problems is by having the districts too small that you might limit actually the opportunity for some people to run.
And you may limit the opportunity for 8 years. If you get a candidate that's on for 4 and then reelected another 4, there won't be another opportunity for 8 years for a candidate to run. And I think it allows, much more opportunities. But as much as the No on C side says that, they all look at the city as a whole, we have already seen evidence that we are now starting to adopt the practices of San Jose, where San Jose has districts, they care about their mini mayors in their district, they care about their district, they're accountable by the voters in that district only, and they are not sensitive to the rest of the city as a whole. So having the city in 3 sections has a broader view of the entire city.
I really feel picked on. San Jose and Roseville, to create 2 examples. No, I'm just kidding.
We love both.
We're
of
not
those
done
cities.
yet, so.
Well, I know and respect all 4 of you, so I don't take anything
Sorry.
that you're saying personally. I am, though, intrigued and interested in this notion of multi-member districts instead of single-member districts, just from the perspective that I am not personally aware of that in any other cities in our state. It's a major part of Measure C. I think we can all agree upon that. Can you explain to the group why it's good or bad? Perhaps why we don't see it other places? Is this something that we've seen discussed in other places we're just not aware of? Anything that you could help illuminate that section? And I think I'm back on this side for starting.
Okay, one of the interesting things that came up with, well, Santa Clara likes to be an innovative city. We don't do what everybody else does. We're the center of what's possible. So I think, that I wasn't surprised that our charter review committee of our residents came up with an idea that's a little different. And actually, the demographer, the professional demographer that was working with the committee, made some comments about that she thought that potentially having that model could lead to having more diversity, I think for some of the reasons that we've mentioned, than by having the strict 6 council districts. And I'm not sure why other people haven't tried it. I think that sometimes, there almost gets to be a fear factor of trying something different and going with what's going, following the herd, and so I hope that we will continue to look at what are ways that we can truly improve the governance for our community.
Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think Teresa said it all, but, it's important. We're always looking at different ways to engage our community, engage all of our neighborhoods in the community. And I know when they talked about multi-member districts, and then if you throw in ranked choice voting or some other type of voting system, our numbers increase dramatically. So as soon as the county is looking at, alternate types of voting, especially with multi-member districts, our numbers will go up and be very reflective of our community.
Thank you. Now to the other side.
Okay, I'll start with this. We say we should learn from other people's mistake. We don't. We should say we should learn from our own mistakes. We don't. We spent, no city has ever won a CVRA lawsuit, and we didn't learn from it. We fought the case. We lost $3.3 million plus another $800, almost $4 million. We didn't learn, still we didn't learn. Now we are again trying to divide. Okay, no other city has done this type of a scenario. Now we want to go to again the same thing. So we are not even learning from our own mistake. Whatever charter review committee did, they were fed a little bit of law information, and I appreciate their work, but whatever information came to council, the buck stops at the council. The council should have made a judicious decision. This is not in the fiscal interest of our residents. Let's not bring this thing up. We already are under hook for almost $4 million. We should have decided the $100 for ordinance will solve this problem, and we should have done that. And that's the reason I'm saying the buck stops at council, and it's no time for experiment anymore. It doesn't. We will lose this case, and we are definitely going to be another hook for another multi-million-dollar for ours. You know what? Cupertino started a shuttle service for 18 months for its residents, cost them $2 million. If we had that saved that $4 million, we could have done a shuttle bus service for 3 years for all our residents, almost free. And that would have been an added benefit to our residents. Let's use that money, whatever we are trying to waste here, let's use that money for some good benefits of our common residents. It does not make sense. We have to make sure we use our money to fix our roads, fix for safety and police things, and that's the best use of our money. We should learn from our mistakes.
I would agree. I would like to recognize that the Charter Review Committee was not, it was a 5-2 vote.
Well, thank you. Well, first I want to say it's, while it may seem contentious to have your council so diametrically opposed on issues, I personally think that conflict makes for very good policy making, and constructive conflict is helpful. Lord knows that Pierre Luigi and I had our share of that while we served on the city council. And for those here in person and those watching online at home, I think that you should you'll gain a lot by having your elected leaders get into this dialogue, and the 4 members we have here have been very engaged. In fact, I have one last question. I know it sounds like I'm closing, but there's one last question. You've all 4 of you have been deeply involved in this measure, and I've read the newspaper editorials that have been written, co-authored, very much like these arguments tonight are co-authored. Personally, I want to thank you on behalf of your voters for your engagement. This is your opportunity for 2 minutes each side to share with us what other things that you have done or will do on behalf of this campaign. What are you doing for the residents that you're representing on this issue, as if we haven't heard enough from you guys about this issue over the last couple of weeks. But I'll give you that opportunity to expand. I think we're back over here this time. I got mixed up on my timing, but I think we're over here. So this is just your opportunity for 2 minutes to share what else you've been doing on this issue on behalf of the residents you represent.
That's the point. We represent everyone in our city. I am elected by the people in my district. They're the ones I will answer directly to, but all of my decisions have to affect everyone. 6 districts has proven to be successful. We have Councilmember Chahal. To be very specific, he's the first Asian American candidate in the city's history. I am concerned that our at-large and any larger districts have favored incumbents. Incumbents should not be comfortable when that election cycle comes around. When we talk about 8 years, that's not right. It's 4 years. And then you answer back to the people in your district. That's important. And if you have not been doing your job, they will vote you out, and it'll be somebody else's turn. I think it's a flawed scheme that threatens the voters' rights by shrinking the number of council districts and making it more difficult for anyone to run. It should be easier.
I would add to that, go to the Murky News editorial. It says Measure C is the most irresponsible South Bay measure on March 3 ballot, and it must be defeated. You know, diversity of leadership is not only benefit to minority communities, but it's beneficial to the whole community and the whole diversity of our city. City of Santa Clara is trying to circumvent the judge's ruling and looking to dilute the minority vote again. This should not happen. We are responsible for our taxpayer money. Please make sure our taxpayer money is used in some better fashion than being wasted in the court of law.
So what do Alex Padilla, the Secretary of State,
NAACP.
Yeah, and the head of the NAACP all have in common, they don't live here, but they feel strongly about it. It's the people who will get to vote, and that's important.
Thank you. And to
Okay,
you.
so one of the things I wanted to comment on was about this idea of incumbency. It's a little bit off the topic, but I think for all the people that are sitting here in front of the room, the first time I ran for council, I did not get elected. The first time Lisa ran, she didn't get elected for mayor. Karen's run several times. Raj has run more than once. So part of it is you really have to work hard and you have to get your name out there. People have to kind of get to know you a little bit. You have to show some credibility as a candidate. There are some people, like I see Councilmember Davis sitting back there, she was very fortunate. She was elected her first time. But for a lot of people, that's just not the way it happens. And so what are we doing for the rest of this election campaign? Just kind of like how I ran for council. I'm talking to friends. I'm posting things on social media. Lisa and I wrote the op-ed. We're doing whatever we can to reach out to people because we don't have $650,000.
In fact, we have a zero budget, so what you see is what you get. But I just want to say things, looking at the last election as an example, and keep in mind, the statistical information said 3 out of the last 10 elections, 30% had racially polarized voting. In the last election, we had Raj Chahal, who was elected. He ran against 2 white candidates, okay? We had Karen Hardy, who ran against a man of color. So she beat out a man of color. So one could say that was polarizing. And we have Hassam Agag, a man of color, ran at large and elected as city clerk in the city of Santa Clara. So there's your 30% right there. That's an example of what Santa Clara is all about. We vote for the candidate, not the and the experience. But what I wanted to say is that Councilmember Hardy said, "What? Oh, Alex Padilla, yes, he is supporting the election." Well, guess what? He and the 49ers share the same political consultant. And this is what the other side's doing. You notice red and gold. Our side has 0 money.
Time. I rarely correct a council member, but one of us up here got elected the first time.
We're the only one.
I just gotta throw that in one time.
Kudos,
so.
I'm out of your.
Well, as very rare for a group of politicians at the front of the room, we said we'd do it in an hour, and we've been here 1 hour and 1 minute, which I think for the structured questions, you guys shocked me and kept your comments to a very manageable time. So I know you use that last question more as a closing statement than answering the question itself. I'll forgive you guys for that. But I'm going to take half of your closing time away from you. So you have 2 minutes to make your closing arguments. Okay, 3. I'll split the difference with you. I saw that we did say we'd give 4 minutes.
I negotiate for a living, 4.5.
Just remember, I didn't stop you and get you to go back to the topic of the question I asked. So we'll give you the 3 minutes to make your closing arguments, and then, as promised, we'll get everyone back home so they can think about this and be ready to cast their ballots if they haven't done so already. So we're going to go opposite of our opening statements. You went first on the opening statements, so we're going to start with you for the closing statements. As a reminder, you have 3 minutes. It's a little shorter than you expected, so just talk a little faster.
As I mentioned, Councilmember Chahal and Patty Mahan and I were against this from the beginning. I have no control over what other people choose to do with money. I am not on their committee. I have not been contacted by them. As my point is, and I even grabbed from my own address, the Secretary of State, former congressman, and other former council members, they don't think this is a good idea. They can see that, but they don't vote. They can put as much money as they want into this. It's a free country. But the reality is, it's the residents that have the choice, and I want them to make that choice and recognize that we're going to be paying for it if we do not uphold the California state law. That is my concern. I can much better use those funds fixing our parks, fixing the potholes, making certain we've synchronized our lights. I don't want to be paying more lawyers. I want to make certain that we're in line with the California Voter Rights Act and that we do what's right for our city and for ourselves.
I say the same thing. Like, we follow the California law. California Voting Right Act has a very low bar to prove these things. Whatever in cities where they have a minority council member already, they still had to do the district. It's not a question of what is the percentage of minorities being. It's a question of, are we following the California Voting Rights Act or not? And if we have to follow that, we have to follow the judgment in front of us. We have to follow the 6 districts. We have to follow that registered voter is not going to hold any at-large election as it mentioned on this one. If you vote C, no on this, it will go to at-large. No, it will not go to at-large. This standing judgment still stands, and we are still under the court judgment that this District 6 will continue. So this is a flawed measure without any due diligence brought forward. And if our residents want to save further millions of dollars, please vote no on that. And we do not want to lose multi-million dollars on this one. It will be a contempt of court. It will be another lawsuit. And CVRA allows multiple lawsuits. Let me tell you that. CVRA allows multiple lawsuits to go at the same time. I have read that, I have studied that. So please vote no on this, and let's keep our money where it needed most, not to give it to the lawyers and all other outside agencies. Thank you.
Time. Thank you. And now your opportunity for
4.5
closing.
minutes, thank you. We believe residents should determine the city's future, not outsiders, judges, or lawsuits. That's why we ask you to support the 3-district plan and support Measure C. Yes vote will approve a plan written by Santa Clarans for Santa Clarans. The majority of the entire city council voted to adopt a charter review committee. The charter review committee was adopted because 70% of our residents, over 70%, said they wanted us to adopt a charter plan that they could vote on. So that came from the residents, not from the city council or a small majority of the city council. We want voters to be able to select someone in each election. This assures we retain the directly elected mayor, which this lawsuit tried to do away with the directly elected mayor. And we want to give neighborhoods more representation with 2 representatives plus the mayor, as opposed to 1 plus the mayor now, which is proven to show all kinds of issues and problems with very parochial type views and not. A no vote will, after November 2020, leave the existing city charter in place. It will be at large. So when the no on C people talk about it's going to cost more for lawsuits and other things, you're correct, but that's only if people vote no, because it will go back to at large. And guess who's going to get richer? The attorneys. The attorneys are the ones fighting against this because then they want to make sure they get their bills paid. So it's all about, you have to follow where the money goes. Once we go back to at large, we probably will have lawsuits unless the citizens of Santa Clara change the charter to a district system. If people really believed it was against the law for what we put on the ballot, there's an opportunity in the beginning before it goes on where anybody can come in. And believe me, there's 1,700 attorneys working on this from the no on C. Anybody could have disputed the city attorney's position that a no vote means we go back to at large. Guess what? Nobody did, not even any council members. Nobody disputed it. So, and the fact that you know why nobody's won the lawsuit? Because we're one of the first cities to actually file a lawsuit. They forgot to tell you that part of it. So it's really important. Santa Clara is a beautiful city and a beautiful community that was built on the blood, sweat, and tears of immigrants. That's who we are. When you look around at our commissions, when you look at the group of people that are our team that's coming up, look at the beautiful colors of everybody we have on our commissions, including our youth commissioners. And guess what? How did Santa Clara look just a few decades ago? This is how Santa Clara looked. These are our forefathers. And with all due respect, they
Time.
did a great job. But now we have 4 mothers here, and it's a different story. So please vote yes on C.
Well, thank you. On behalf of the Silicon Valley Taxpayers Association and on behalf of all your residents here in Santa Clara, I want to thank the mayor, the vice mayor, the 2 council members for joining us tonight, keeping this a nice and civil debate. I respect each of you for the work you've done for your community and the views that you have and that you've shared with us tonight. For those of you in the audience, thank you for laughing at my bad jokes. For those of you watching us on the streaming, remember those cameras add 50 pounds. So with that, we are completed. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.